Every time I'm walking on down the street, somebody stop breaking down with me, stop breaking down. Please stop breaking down. Don't bust your brains out, Lord, it'll make you lose your mind. Can't walk the streets to consolate my mind. Always somebody trying to take my time, stop breaking down. Please stop breaking down. Gotta bust your brains out, Lord, it'll make you lose your mind. Saturday night women, they like to get back clown. Don't do nothing but tear it down, stop breaking down. Please stop breaking down. Have to bust your brains out, Lord, it'll make you lose your mind. Your brains out, Lord, it'll make you lose your mind.
So that's just a covert little message to our BC Ministry of Health. Stop breaking down rural community health. So I'm just going to start by setting the scene. My protagonist, Roy Breen, is a journalist who has been working in the city for 15 years in Vancouver, and he is originally a Kootenai boy, so he's returning back to home ground by coming to the Kootenays again. And he discovers the tiny mountain village of El Dorado in the Valhalla Mountains next to Sapphire Lake. The names have been changed to protect the innocent, you notice. We wouldn't want to offend any of the mountain ranges or lakes in the area. So here it is, October 2003, a beautiful fall day. The cusp of the snow-bitten Valhalla Range cut into the October blue with such crispness I could almost feel it all the way down below at lake level. Ice crystals on the El Dorado Glacier between the twin peaks glittered in the sun as if winking at me. Better find cover, son. Camping season is over. Sapphire Lake was a mirror, deepening in color with the season change, reflecting the retreating ranks of the Valhalla Mountains. Like most of the glacier-fed lakes in this region, it was narrow but incredibly deep and shockingly cold. The ragged granite that cradled these lakes gave the water a starkly beautiful indigo cast. There was something oddly comforting to the eye about it. Yet its clear, clean waters were profoundly energizing, a kind of holy well on the roof of the world. I wondered what saints, sinners, modern-day mystics, or just plain crazies would be attracted to it. I would soon find out. The angular crispness of autumn light cast everything in sharp relief, prompting me to wonder what the hell I'd been thinking. It just wasn't like me to bolt from a good job in the city and wander the countryside in a beat-up '85 Toyota Corolla station wagon with Shadow Cat. Sure, I'd grown up in northern British Columbia, learning the tricks of wilderness survival from my old man. So camping wasn't particularly a hardship for me. It activated an old touchstone from family camping trips. Very soon it all came flooding back in. How to build a proper campfire, how to catch trout, how to leave a campsite cleaner than I found it. And with it, the gradual lessening of white noise I carried with me from the city, so that I could finally actually hear the subtle sounds all around me. But with the first bite of winter in the air, it was time to find more permanent lodgings. And anyway, 2 weeks of pitching camp and then having to pile everything into the station wagon every few days was starting to get old. Leaving Vancouver hadn't been particularly hard. 15 years of slogging in the journalistic trenches, inter-office politics, and the whole damn clatter and grind of city living had frayed my nerve ends. Like that old saying, I've got one nerve left and you're getting on it. It's what I should have said to my editor Bob Lejean at the Vancouver Daily when I quit. Though in fairness to him, it wasn't his fault. Instead, I half mumbled something lame about needing a change of pace, a break with city living. Truth was, what I got for my years of faithful service was a demotion. Supposedly I was being given a roving reporter gig, when what I really wanted was the city hall beat. Sure, politics has a way of getting old fast. But it meant less jerking myself all over the city and rush hour traffic all the goddamn time. Hitting my mid-40s, I was getting tired. City hall beat meant mostly phone work. A few trips a week to the iconic building for research and interviews, and the occasional ribbon-cutting photo op around the city. Whereas the new job meant basically being on call daily, chasing after every news lead like a cub reporter. That could take me from Granville Island in the morning to the deepest, darkest burbs of Langley in the afternoon. The managing editor, Veronica Mills, had mealy-mouthed something about my years of experience suiting me ideally to the position. She was the corporate type, parachuted into the newspaper from Toronto to try and cut costs. I made it quite clear I was not impressed with her hiring a 23-year-old intern to do the job that rightfully should have been mine given my experience. I muttered some choice words on the way out of her office, not giving a damn whether she'd hear. I was done anyway. Christ! Some bean counter comes in and poof! Half a century of journalism practice out the window. No more veteran reporters. No more regular beats. Just a steady stream of underpaid cub reporters straight out of journalism school. So Roy is traveling, as I mentioned, with his cat. And Shadow Cat is one of the characters in the book. In fact, I had one reader of the book in advance of publication say that it was his favorite character. The reason he's there, aside from personal experience, is that he acts as a kind of a Greek chorus to the story. He and Roy are almost telepathically linked. They know immediately what one another are thinking. And Shadow Cat is a truth teller. He cuts right to the chase. So, here is the introduction to that character. Okay, I admit it. So far, my longest running stable relationship had been with my cat. A Persian, long hair, I named Shadow Cat. Felines, I understand, far more than humans of either sex. I believe they're a superior species, totally independent and self-sufficient in the wild or in domestication. How we ever domesticated cats is a mystery to me. I'm sure Shadow Cat would argue, it's the other way around, buddy. We domesticated you. Certainly, feline adaptability is a marvel. Looking at Shadow Cat half buried beneath the passenger seat as we drive into the village of El Dorado, I have to wonder. Occasionally, he pops his head out long enough to look up at me with those ethereal blue-green eyes. It's hard to know whether it's car sickness or sheer disgust he's beaming up at me. Probably both. One minute it's the expression of a guy after a 3-day bender, begging for an answer to the question, will I ever feel better? The next, it's, how could you do this to me, you bastard? Still, he's been a hell of a good sport these past 2 weeks as I ride around the Kootenays like a lost puppy looking for a home. When I roll up to a campsite, he leaps out of the car and disappears to reconnoiter before settling in for the night. The first time it happened, I worried about him getting lost or snatched by an owl or coyote. But his feline smarts kicked in instantly. All I had to say once was, check in with Dad, okay? He'd make his rounds on the outer perimeter of firelight, and then return to brush up against my calf every 15 minutes or so, refusing to leave until I acknowledged him. I've lost track of the stories I've had to write as a journalist of people who went into the wilderness, pushed the limits, and died as a result. Not even the bloody smarts of a household cat. Very quickly, Roy realizes, to his delight, that in this tiny little village of about 750 people, there is a newspaper, and an independent one at that, called the Mountain Echo. So he rolls into the office and lets them know that he's available for work, and has a long chat with Lance Robertson, the publisher. And Lance informs him that when asked to sum up the sort of sociology of the community in one sentence, his sister once said, paused for a moment to think and said, Norman Rockwell with dreadlocks. And I think many of us have lived and grown up in the Kootenays would agree with that assessment. So quickly, Lance assigns him to his first job, which is to cover a public meeting that's been called by the Provincial Health Authority at the El Dorado Public Hall. And they have an announcement they're going to make. They're not letting the cat out of the bag just yet, so you have to be there for the meeting. And this is also Roy's mini education into the demographics of the El Dorado community, if not the entire Valley community. Watching the parade of locals coming in was an education in itself, as diverse in its own way as a gay pride parade on Burrard Street in Vancouver. The aging hippies, in all sizes, shapes, and colors, the clothes no longer psychedelic, but looking like an explosion in a thrift store, everything mismatched, faded as if it hadn't been replaced in far too long, the hair still long, braided on both men and women, although woven now with gray and marred by men's receding hairlines. Then the New Age mystics, Except for the age bracket, it could be hard to tell them apart from the aging hippies. You had to look at their necks and ears, usually festooned with multiple earrings and dangling chunks of quartzite crystal big enough to choke a mastiff. The other chief difference between them and the aging hippies was in the eyes. Many of the latter had long been on the front lines of protest and activism. The weariness of decades bled through bleary eyes. The New Agers were typically younger, the eyes still bright, like children with an all's right with the world glow. And the loggers, with their perpetual air of barely restrained aggression. Trying hard not to be seen looking at the New Agers or the aging hippies for fear of being ridiculed by their buddies later at the pub. A few of the village public works crew wearing their check shirts, work boots, and safety vests, looking as neutral as possible. And a contingent of senior citizens with clothing bland enough to obscure any affiliations whatsoever. By 7:10, one of the officials at the head table tapped a mic to see if it was working. He was clean shaven as a billiard ball, scalp looking as if it had been buffed with carnauba wax. His features were narrow, pinched nose, thin lips, slitty eyes behind narrow glasses. We'd like to get started if everyone could please take your seats. My name is Wade Detweiler, Chief Financial Officer for the PHA Southeast BC Division. Turning to his left, he pointed at a woman in her 30s with long dark hair and designer glasses. This is Marla Frankenheim, our Chief Public Relations Officer. Marla displayed teeth so bleached it blinded the first 3 rows in front of her. Leaning forward in his chair to get a better view, Detweiler extended his arm toward the third person at the table, a youngish man of indeterminate age with carefully cultivated beard stubble. And this is Josh Denton, one of our policy analysts. His hipster features twitched in what passed for a smile. We ask that you allow us to present our case before asking questions, Detweiler began. Your village mayor, Larry Miller, will act as moderator during question period. Please respect his direction. He pointed out a man sitting in the front row who could have passed for one of the aging hippies. Miller had glasses, a gray and ginger mustache, hair thinned out on top, and a ponytail. Somehow I had missed him. He turned and flashed a grin at the crowd. There was an impish expression on his face that said, "Folks, we all know what this is about, but let's just play along anyhow." It was a face that managed to look both slightly conniving yet warm at the same time. A politician's face, yet not somehow. Detweiler sucked in a lungful and leapt into the breach. As you probably know, the PHA was formed with the mandate to ensure equal delivery of health services across the province. Our Premier has gone on record affirming his support for the BC Medical Services Plan. A man's voice from the crowd cut him off. If that's true, then why do you keep raising rates and lowering benefits? Laughter rumbled across the wooden floor. This wasn't going to be easy. Detweiler gave a prim sigh, turning to Mayor Miller, who rose with a mic in his hand. Folks, please save your questions and comments for later. Thanks. As part of our year in review of ministry finances last year, Detweiler continued, a few adjustments have had to be made if we're to balance this year's budget.
As the average age of British Columbians continues to climb upward,
A woman's voice this time.
How can you keep charging us more and more, yet still claim you have to make cutbacks to balance the budget?
Detweiler lifted his hands helplessly, looking toward Miller. Miller stood up again, speaking loudly but without annoyance. Folks, please, I know you've got a lot on your minds, but if we can just let these people have their say, we can all get home sooner. Thanks, we appreciate it. Detweiler soldiered on.
as I was saying, as the average age of British Columbians continues to climb upward, the costs of the healthcare system also spiral upward.
Muttered growls of bullshit arose from the loggers' contingent. Detweiler pressed on, keeping his voice as bland as possible.
And yes, I understand we're all having to pay more for our Medicare premiums. Nobody likes that. But it means we have to make hard choices, choices nobody likes. Not you and not us, but they have to be made.
Another male voice.
Get to the point. We don't have all night.
Detweiler seemed to wither a little. He turned to his chief PR flack, Marla Frankenheim, as if helplessly seeking rescue. She straightened in her chair and flashed her pearlies again, causing a few in the front row to cover their eyes. It couldn't have been more fake if she'd cut it out of a magazine and stuck it on her mouth. There were more diamonds on her chubby fingers than in the rest of the hall combined.
Thanks, Wade. What Wade is trying to say is that in the interest of efficiency, and given the small population base here in El Dorado and Elkville, we think a reduction in emergency room hours at the Sapphire Lake Health Center is in order.
It's a hospital, a woman in the front row muttered.
Well, technically, under our new definitions, it's a health center, Frankenheim explained, still smiling.
One of the taller loggers shot up from his chair.
What kind of goddamn reduction?
Miller stood up too. Please, please, folks, let's keep this civil. You'll all get your say.
Let me explain, continued Frankenheim. We keep the helipad so the acute cases can be shipped out to Hannahville to the south of you, or Caledon to the west, where we have full surgical facilities, which at present is really no change to current services here. But as a means of preserving your ER and keeping the health center open within current budgetary constraints, we propose 7 days a week from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m.
It was as if a bomb had been set off in the hall. Half the audience were out of their seats shouting. Many were gesticulating angrily, especially the loggers. Great! I'll just make sure I have a heart attack during banker's hours then, shall I?
Fucking logging don't work 9 to 5. Why should the ER?
And a woman's voice.
What will I do? My baby runs a fever in the middle of the night.
So later in that meeting scene, it's also revealed that in addition to scaling back the emergency room hours, they're planning on taking out the diagnostic lab with the x-ray equipment. Whereupon it's pointed out to Detweiler and these other provincial health authority people that in fact, all of that equipment was bought with fundraising in the local community. So, strictly speaking, that equipment is owned by the community, and in no way are they going to allow it to be removed. So what happens is a very capable young woman who runs a local restaurant, a woman in her 30s, named Rosanna, decides that she's going to form a vigil. And it's going to be a round-the-clock vigil, 24/7, at the diagnostic lab doors. And they're going to have at least 2 or 3 people sitting outside those doors at all times, night or day, in case the provincial health authority decides to swoop in under cover of night to remove this equipment. Which, as it happens, they do end up attempting later in the story. But as we know, and as I joked with Anne Grace when I did my Nelson Library interview on her co-op radio program, the Kootenays are chock-a-block with eccentrics, with people who are wonderful in their own way, well-meaning, perhaps a little bit just off-kilter in some ways. And so they all leap into the breach too, wanting to help, to save the ER, but some of their ideas are maybe just a little less practical than others. And here we meet one of them. Now, because I had that comment about the dreadlocks, I felt I had to include somebody with dreadlocks, and we see that a lot in the Kootenays, both white and black people. A black man in his mid-50s with graying dreadlocks was arguing with a woman about the same age. The woman had shoulder-length, mostly gray hair and glasses, and wore a wool poncho. On her feet were a pair of beaded mucklucks I'd almost have killed for. The man wore John Lennon spectacles beneath a deeply trenched brow. He spoke clearly and used a forefinger to puncture the air as he made his points. His Jamaican accent was clear but softened by long years living in Canada, though still peppered with Rastafarian slang. The woman was looking a bit cowed, unable to keep up with his verbal onslaught. Now, I'm going to apologize in advance for my Rastafari accent. Okay? So, just bear with me. I just do my part. Yeah, okay, Cinnamon Bear. Sweeping his arms to indicate the group forming around their argument, he said, I, here to help, yeah. Rosanna strode up, laying a hand on his shoulder. What's the problem, Moss? He turned toward her, and his hands spread open in a supplicating gesture. I tell my sister and here, I, everybody, we do our part, yeah? She don't think I should do my part. My fucking contribution don't matter to her. He had a way of ending his sentences with a question, as if it were self-evident. Marie-Louise sighed loudly. That's not what I said, Moss. That's not what I meant. Okay, said Rosanna, raising her hands in truce. From the beginning now. He wants to do his own protest, Marie-Louise began. He wants... Moss threw up his hands dramatically. Aye, Babylon! Down pressure from my own sister. She won't even let I say it. It was my idea, wasn't it? You saying I'm not allowed to fucking tell it. Marie-Louise held up her palms in surrender. Okay, sorry, Moss. He didn't waste a millisecond. Sister Rosanna, here I, please. You know, when I was a young cub, I studied in Catholic seminary, yeah. He let the silence drop, waiting for a response. I took notes, but could feel questions forming in the back of my mind about this man. Rosanna nodded. Of course, Moss. I've known you since I was a kid. Marie-Louise was busy rolling a cigarette from a handcrafted leather pouch, fingers trembling a little. Now I regular no more in church, but you know I never lie, yeah. I take on the Jah spirit, justice, not the Babylon law since I come to Canada. I could sense him making an effort to tone down his language, wrestling down the tempest inside him. In seminary, I learned church fathers go down on their knees 6 times a day to Virgin Mary.
I learned unity of all who praise Jah, Christian, Muslim, Rastaman, Jah spirit the same in all. Some they smoke the holy herb in praise, some they make the holy pilgrimage, Jah.
Sure, Moss. I understand, Rosanna said. How can I help?
So I do my own protest for I and I.
Again, he indicated the group with a wave.
I go on my knees all the way to Nukam, just like they do at the shrines, like Camino de Santiago. I that got to get the fucking government attention. Pardon my French. The Lion of Judah in the mountains.
He smacked his fist into an open palm to seal his argument as if it were irrefutable. For once, Rosanna looked rattled. But Moss, that's over 100 kilometers, 60 miles on your knees. That could be dangerous on these narrow mountain roads. What if someone runs over you just because they can't see you down there on your knees? He flashed a satisfied grin of yellowed, worn-down teeth.
Ah, Sister Rosanna, all this I read. Don't worry, I carry own banner to the walls of Babylon. Save our ER word. I write in the big red letters. Yeah.
Do you have support for this tactic? I asked. He looked puzzled momentarily. I could see the tumblers rolling behind his eyes, searching for a plausible answer. Marie-Louise chuckled as she exhaled a long draught of smoke. He glared at her.
Never you mind, Sister Ann. I know somebody gonna help I, even if you won't. Everyone know I. They ain't gonna let I go hungry, no thirsty.
Marie-Louise sighed through a cloud of smoke. I didn't say I wouldn't help, Moss. Don't put words in my mouth. Rosanna reached out to hold him gently at arm's length. Moss, we love you. Of course, we would never let you go out on the road unsupported. A relieved grin spread across his face. I've known you since you was a kitten, Sister Rosanna. Always said you was one of the good ones. Thank you,